Hello, my name is Cassie Steele, and I want to take a few minutes to talk about inner wisdom, both what it is and how I learned to communicate with my own and also my clients' inner wisdom. So, inner wisdom was a concept that I learned about probably about 12 years ago when I first started studying craniosacral therapy through the Upledger Institute, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But what an inner wisdom is to me is this concept of a higher intelligence that is beyond our typical capacity, our typical mental capacity. So a higher intelligence that knows all, experiences all, and it's this part of us that knows exactly where we've been, exactly where we're going. It knows all of our wounds, our traumas, our biggest fears. It knows exactly what we came here and manifested into physical form in order to do, to be, to feel, and to experience in this lifetime. Some people may refer to your inner wisdom as your higher self or your God self, and there may be other words as well that you may use to describe what your inner wisdom means to you. And what I find is that it doesn't really matter what we call this, as long as what we call it, as long as we relate to that in a way that feels good to us. So I invite you, if inner wisdom doesn't feel good to you or you want to use a little bit different word, I invite you to just use that interchangeably with the words that I'm using as well. So how did I come to be able to communicate with the inner wisdom? So much of, I would say, a lot of my work has been heavily influenced by Dr. John Upledger's craniosacral therapy. I've studied craniosacral therapy and also somato-emotional release through the Upledger Institute. And what this basically is a process. So Dr. John discovered that our cerebral spinal fluid, which is the fluid that runs between the brain and spinal cord, and the dural, the covering that goes over the brain and spinal cord. And so what he discovered is that the fluid in that space actually pulses throughout our body. And he determined or discovered that he could palpate this pulse anywhere on the body, and he could also read that pulse in a way that through identifying the symmetry or the kind of robustness of the pulse, he could indicate just through palpating the body where there were lesions or traumas or things that where our energy, so to speak, wasn't flowing as well as it could be. And so he would treat with very, very light pressure on the body these various imbalances that he would find, and had tremendous results in his therapy of people healing, feeling better, relieving pain, healing diseases of all sorts. And so the more he treated the body, the more he discovered that as a patient was going deeper into their therapeutic process, which meant that they were going deeper into a release. So whether they were releasing a past emotional trauma, a mental trauma, or a physical trauma, it didn't really matter. The craniosacral rhythm, which he later termed the significance detector, was always there guiding him. It was guiding him in terms of like where to put his hands on the body and how to facilitate the release, and the questions that he would ask and what the patient would say in response to that. There was always this indicator that was either telling him to move in this direction, shift directions a little bit, reword that a little bit differently, or get the patient to go back. Like sometimes the patient would get, as they were telling the story, as they were remembering the story, sometimes they would kind of start to go down a rabbit hole with their thoughts and limiting beliefs about it, and he would read the rhythm in a way that he knew how to kind of back them back up to when they had been last in touch with their inner wisdom. And so I learned this technique, and I've been using this technique with my clients probably for 8 to 10 years that I've really been studying it. And one of the things that, so many of you are probably familiar with muscle testing. A lot of chiropractors do like kinesiology, muscle testing. So it's basically where you have your client hold your arm out and you ask them a question. And if the answer is a yes, if the answer is a yes, their strength will remain firm. But if the answer is a no, the arm will drop. So basically, it's the exact same concept when we're palpating the craniosacral rhythm. We can literally feel yeses and nos. And so for many years of my career, I was working. So my background is that I'm a physical therapist. So I was working in a busy PT clinic, and I was constantly asking my patients questions, not out loud, but I was asking the body questions about, okay, is this injury, is it physical, is it mental or emotional? What's the primary source? Um, like, what's the primary root cause of what's happening here? And I would do this all day long. And then as I started studying the organs, and I started studying the craniosacral system, and I started studying the emotions, I found myself getting better and better at being able to dialogue with the body through these yes no questions. So I was asking, not only is this physical, mental, emotional, spiritual in source, but I was asking, is this organ related, is this hormone related, is this bone, joint, muscle, right? I had this long list of things that I could ask the body, and I could get yes or no responses back. And so that was how I learned to guide my treatments. And so beyond that, as I started my own private practice, and I started working with patients privately on that level, I was able to really discern that their symptoms or challenges, whatever it was that they were coming to me for, there was always a deeper symbolic meaning behind their symptoms. And so I would start to feel that intuitively as I was working with people. I would start to intuitively feel what their inner wisdom was trying to communicate with them through their symptoms, through their challenges, through their emotions, especially, to the point where I didn't have to ask the yes no questions quite as much. Because I was just intuitively feeling what it was that their inner wisdom wanted them to know. And so this is what I teach my clients now. I teach my clients how to know whether they are listening to and hearing the voice of their inner wisdom, or whether they're, what I would say, kind of stuck in a more mentally initiated, where we're really exercising the power of being rational and analytical and logical, which often takes us down a rabbit hole, so to speak, and leads us in a direction that is not always what we want. And so the passion in my work is really being able to teach people how to know what their inner wisdom is communicating with them, and how to really trust the guidance that they're receiving.